This is, I think, Green Thursday, a scree garden. We're going to talk about a parking lot garden that we put together here at the Extension office, which you can apply to a hot spot, say down by your mailbox or any place where your hose won't reach. And it's a dry area. So I suppose the first thing you want to know is, what is scree? It's kind of a weird word, but it kind of applies to what we're striving for in this type of garden. And here's the definition. It's a loose gravel formed through the weathering process as water freezes in stone crevices and slowly breaks large rocks apart and accumulates at the base of mountain slopes. Scree provides excellent drainage, but plants growing in this type of environment must be able to withstand hot, dry conditions during the summer and sub-freezing winter temperatures. Deep root systems and small plant size help them to survive under these difficult conditions. So that's what we're going for here. And this is basically a picture of the Athabasca Glacier in Alberta, Canada. And as it retreats over this is what's left behind, which is scree. And as water moves through the rocks, it makes the scree. These pictures were taken at the Athabasca Glacier or in Alberta. And you can see there are some plants, grasses especially, have deep roots that can get down into some moisture. And this is a fireweed, another plant that grows well in scree in Alberta, Canada, but we have a little bit different issues here than they do in Canada. So I traveled around and I found some inspiration. And I found some inspiration here around the country. I'm sorry, I'm having to admit people into. I have found some inspiration around the country. This was taken at the Atlanta Botanical Garden, which was one of the scree gardens that I visited. And as you can see, that they've got a lot of cactus growing there. Some of these are probably not hardy here, but gives some ideas. This is a little closer to home, the J.C. Ralston Arboretum in Raleigh. They have a big scree garden. And this is another view of that same garden. This is a little spot in Chapel Hill called the Unique Plant. And they had some areas of scree kind of mixed in with other types of landscaping. So it works well with others. This is also at that Unique Plant garden, just a little patch of scree here. This is Juniper Level Botanical Garden also in Raleigh. This is Plant Delights Nursery, and they have an excellent scree garden. You see here, one of the things that helps us to do this type of gardening in this, where we have such heavy clay soil, is building a berm. Look at this big berm that's built here. Here's another one also at Juniper Level, built a berm to increase drainage. So this is the Paul J. Senior garden in Botanical Garden in Kernersville. And this is really the inspiration for putting this garden in a parking lot. This is in their parking lot at the Botanical Garden, and they built it in a similar situation to what we have here at the Cooperative Extension at the Agricultural Building in our parking lot. Hot, dry spot. We've had various trees in this location. The trees have not been long-lived. This Bermuda grass, which is a good grass for this type of area, also creeps into any other kind of bed you have. So it creates a giant weeding issue. So this was one solution for this type of spot, but we thought, or I thought, it might be a good idea to try something else. So first thing to do is a soil test. Decided, inspired by these scree gardens that I have visited, I thought maybe we could do that here. So the soil test indicated that The pH is 5.8, phosphorus is 27, it should be 50 plus, and potassium's fine at 50 plus. So measure the area so you know what you need to do, what you need to add. And this area is approximately 750 square feet. Did a plan. This is a little plan I drew up, and some plant ideas that I had. These plants, some of these plants were moving from other places in the garden, or removed from other places in the garden. And some things were in pots, and you'll discover as we go along that some plants that do really well in pots will especially appreciate this situation. Also, we ordered some plants from Plant Delights, and we also went to A&A Plants and got some plants from there. Of course, the kind of work we did for a big garden like this, you're going to have some heavy equipment. You can scale all this down to the spots you have, so it can be done by hand. And luckily, we have master gardeners Eddie and Pam Love, who have a landscape company, and they helped us with this. So the first thing to do is remove the sod and the perennial weeds, which was approximately 9 yards. And if you see Eddie at work here, taking out the sod and the perennial weeds. So all of that soil was removed. Then loosen the remaining soil to at least 12 inches deep. This is going to be a hard part for if you're doing this by hand, because 12 inches is a pretty deep hole. So, but Eddie is up to the task, and he measured. So this is the soil that's been removed and has been loosened up to the depth of 12 inches. But, you know, we still might have a drainage issue with our clay base. So we checked for drainage. And again, if you are building this type of garden on top of heavy clay soil that doesn't drain well, you might want to do, in addition to digging down a little bit, build up to a berm or put it on a slope. As you can see, this is at the bottom of the 12 inches. We drilled, this is how you'll check for drainage. Dig a hole and put water in it. And if the water is still there the next day, you have a drainage issue. So you might want to build up. So we put in pea gravel or permatil. This is your scree portion, about 2 parts soil to 1 part gravel or permatil. Permatil is much more expensive than the pea gravel. And we haven't had any trouble with the pea gravel. So that was about 7 yards or 9 tons of pea gravel. And we added 1 part of compost or pine bark fines, about 6 yards of that. Also, when we put in plants over time, when we add the plants, we will mix in a little bit of compost at the same time that we plant. Mix it well. That was cute. And so here's our compost that we added, and here's the pea gravel, and here's the mixing. It took a while. And this on the right has been mixed, and this is the soil that's ready to be mixed. This is what it looks like basically when you're done with the mixing. It's you'll have your clay in there, but you'll also have compost, and you'll have the gravel, which will keep airspace in there, so water and air can travel through the soil. So you incorporate soil amendments as indicated by the soil test, and there's the soil test reminder that we did. We had pH of 5.8, phosphorus was 27, and potassium 99. So the indication on the soil test was to add 40 pounds of ground limestone and 15 pounds of superphosphate, which is 0. If you know your fertilizer makeup, the first number is nitrogen, the second number is phosphorus, and the third number is potassium. So we did not need any potassium, and we did not, you generally don't add nitrogen until you actually add plants, because nitrogen is broken down quickly in the soil. So here's Eddie adding the amendments, tilling in the amendments. And then he built the berm. Now it's kind of hard to see in these pictures where the berm is. It's shaped like a C kind of, or a comma. Let me see if I can do this. There we go. This is a berm. It's probably about 18 inches tall. And we use that as part of to improve drainage. And then just for art's sake, we added rocks. And it helps a lot if you have a source of rocks. And these rocks came from Pritchett Farms Nursery, and we thank Vaughn Willoughby, because that's his tractor. He helped us get the rocks. And of course, there's Mark Daniely, our former director and horticulture agent, who helped with this project as well, as you'll see in the next few pictures. Okay, here we are putting the rocks in. Now, I've seen some video or some pictures of scree gardens that are being built that use much bigger rocks than these, but these are about the biggest rocks we could handle with the equipment we had. And of course, we tried to make it look as natural as possible by building them in a little bit. Plants, put the plants in, and you notice that the plants are mostly on the higher portion of the berm, especially the plants that require good drainage. Mulch, this is very important, and this helps a lot with cutting down weeds and also helps with the drainage. And the mulch in this situation is just more pea gravel and about 1 inch deep. So as you can see, it just kind of dresses things up and also continues with helping with the drainage. Master gardeners were a big part of this whole project. Water it, I know the hose reaches. We have a lucky hose that reaches all the way out here, but we only had to do this one time, and that was right after the plants are planted. If you're doing this down by your mailbox or some other place where you can't reach with the hose, you can just tote down a watering can and water in your plants, and you should only have to do it that one time. And that's what it looked like when we were done. That was 2015-16. Okay, so now let's talk about the plants. And this is some things that we have learned over time. Okay, we started out with the Mediterranean herbs, and these have worked. These are plants that work well in pots. As you can see, these were in pots. These two were here in the pots by the front door, and we just moved them over to the scree garden. And here's what they look like now. The rosemary is absolutely adoring this spot. It's absolutely huge, and I've never seen lavender grow any better than it grows in our scree garden. So the Mediterranean herbs are definitely a check plus for your scree garden or your dry garden. And they look good most of the time. Okay, now you would think succulents would be a great thing to put in this type of situation, but as it turns out, the stonecrop sedums did not do very well. They pretty much burned up. We've got some other succulents in the garden that appreciate a little bit more moisture and a little bit less sun, surprisingly. Hens and chicks are nestled in among the rocks, and that seems to protect them enough so that they have hung in there, and they are still there, nestled among the rocks. This is one in bloom. Gaillardia, another good drainage plant. Unfortunately, the standard Gaillardia faded after, it was good for a couple of years and then it eventually faded away. However, this one, Gaillardia estivalis variety Winklerii, boy, that was easy, is great. And it has spread some, and it blooms pretty much from, I guess around July. It blooms from summer into frost. This native prickly pear. This is a native plant that is our own native cactus, and it is, you would expect, loving the spot very much. This is with the fruit on it, and it has these beautiful yellow flowers in the spring. As a matter of fact, it loves the spot so much that we'll revisit this a little bit later when we talk about maintenance. Agave Perii. We have a couple of different varieties. This Agave striata live wires did not make it. However, the Perii is a spreader and has spread through a row. They are dangerous. They have the spikes on them, but you can easily remove them if you have them. If they're not where you want them, just shovel them up. They have an odd long rhizome that goes under the ground that you can just cut off and pull out. We also added one called Agave Ovarifolia. This is whale tongue agave, and it gets really big. It's not that huge yet, but it's very photogenic. Desert spoon. This one we had actually in another part of the garden and moved over here to this scree garden, and it has taken off. It's very happy here. So, and a really pretty shape in the garden. Russian sage, another plant that is enjoying the drainage. This is a plant of high desert. I think the most beautiful plantings of it I've seen were in Denver, which is the highest, which is the high desert. It's dry and it's at elevation, but it's doing very well in this garden. Manfreda undulata. Okay, this one's called chocolate chips, and this is a really cool looking plant, and it has grown into this big clump and has these great flower spikes that come up and have these odd looking flowers. Really cool plant to have here. Another variety we put in a couple years later is called Helen Winans, and it doesn't have as many chips as chocolate chip, but it has a few chocolate chips, and this one's a spreader, and it spreads similarly to the way the agave spreads, but it's not as pointy as the agave, so it's less dangerous. Spanish Snapdragon. This one is not as long lived, but I was amazed at how well it did in this situation. So even though it only lasted a few years, it still comes up a little bit, but I've already ordered a few more of these to put in to revive it, because it did really well at this situation. And it's also a food plant for fritillaries, so which is one of our great butterflies we have around here. So, and they also will, the fritillaries will also feed on the standard in your garden snapdragons, which is also Antirinum, but the Spanish Snapdragon does much better, is more perennial and in this hot, dry area, or this hot, dry situation. Yucca Filamentosa, this is the perfect situation for this plant, although it does well just about anywhere, as long as it gets enough sun. And it has beautiful white flowers in May, and the rest of the time it just has these nice and not as not as pointy sticky as the agaves, but does really well. Agastache, this one is a nice floriferous perennial that does really well in the garden. We have an orange variety that I think is called Kudos, and this blue one, I can't remember, I think it's called Blue Boa. Okay, here's one we tried and it didn't make it. So I find that when you look on the plant requirements, if it says sun to part sun, it's probably not, it may or may not be hardy enough to take the full burning sun of the middle of the parking lot, but give it a try anyway. Delosperma, boy, is this ice plant, this is a perfect situation for this succulent. And of course, it maintains these succulent leaves most of the winter. And then it has these cool flowers. This one's called Fire Spinner. And this one is your Delosperma cooperi, your standard pink ice plant. There's also other colors available. Great scree garden plant. Mossy phlox, this one particular, Phlox nivalis camla, it's blooming right now in the garden and it looks fantastic. The clumps get bigger and bigger. Phlox subulata, which is the one you see more often, it's not as vigorous as the Phlox nivalis, but I took this picture this week and it's blooming, so it's pretty. I took both of these pictures this week. I kept wanting to have the most up-to-date pictures. Baptisia, I can't say, if you can only have one plant in your scree garden, this is the plant to have. It's done amazingly well in this situation. It has a deep root. You'll find out that a lot of these plants are not really easily transplanted because they have such deep tap roots. Baptisia is one of the ones that has such a deep tap root that transplanting it or dividing it is almost impossible. However, it self-sows and you can plant the seeds and you can have new plants. Of course, if you have more than one color, you might not, if you're planting seeds, you might not end up with the same color. This is a native plant too. And these color variations are all hybrids. This one is a little bit different, Baptisia arachnifera, hairy rattleweed. It's not quite as vigorous as the others. However, it does have these really cool white gray leaves. And I'm hoping that the purple one from the slide before, grape taffy, this is where down here is where the yellow, where the rattlesnake one is, and this guy just got so big that I think we're going to have to, we might have to rethink something there or do a little pruning so that the other one has some, the arachnifera has some room. This is Anastacanthis Rightyi, Texas Firecracker. A little bit warmer climate, this would be more of a shrub. But because we do have winter temperatures that get below freezing, it will die back somewhat. So we'll do some cutting back in the late spring to cut off anything that died over winter. But it comes back from the roots, if nothing else. This is a real interesting plant, Hesperialo Parvaflora. It has this really long flowering spike with bright red flowers. It's real showy in the garden, and then it has a spiky leaves that are also attractive in their own way, even when it's not blooming. Enothera lindheimeri, which I preferred much the other name of Gora, which was what it used to be, Gora lindheimeri. But This one, whirling butterflies. It's a wonderful plant. It starts blooming in late spring, and it will bloom and it will continue to bloom even after frost. So it's a wonderful, wonderful plant to have in the scree garden. It needs this great drainage because we have had it in other places in the garden where it was not happy because of the clay in the soil. So if you have this plant, just make sure you have good drainage for it. Okay. Slebius Milkweed. We put in first Slebius incarnata, which lasted a couple of years, but it's this is actually called swamp milkweed, and you would not have excuse me, you would not have thought that it would be good for a scree garden. And as a matter of fact, in a couple of years, it faded and it is no longer there. So we're trying Slebius tuberosa, the native, with you'll see it on roadsides, and we have great hopes that it will do great. This is probably the only plant that's not, I don't have a picture of it in the scree garden yet, but I would definitely try it. Yeah, trying in 2021. Okay, those are the plants that we've tried, and some have failed and many have succeeded, and we love the garden the way it is, but we also have plans to try a few more, and we'll keep you posted on how they do. Maintenance. The beauty part is it's really just an occasional minimal thing with maintenance. So weeding is one thing, but if you keep your mulch up with the gravel, with the scree, you shouldn't have too many problems with weeds. And there's a tiny bit of pruning. So this is what happens in late winter. You get these tiny, most of these are teeny tiny violets that came in, but the scuffle hoe, surprisingly, worked wonders, and it took about, what the heck? It took about a minute to do this, to go from this to this. Pruning. Now, remember I mentioned that the prickly pear overstepped its bounds. And even if you can see over here, this was our poor little agave, the whale tongue agave, which is leaning out of the way of this monster, which has been rather more successful than we even wished for. So the way to prune it, we used loppers. Master gardeners came out with loppers, and put the pieces in a bucket and put them in the dumpster. So they went to the landfill. But you can start them easily from another paddle, and this is where it is now. And you can see the agave over here in the corner. It's going to be much happier this year, I think. And now I've got a little bit, because we're so happy with this garden and it looks really good most of the year, or I would say even all of the year, I put in a few slides of what it looks like month to month. And this was January, one of our rare snows, and I think it's really cool with the shapes with the snow on them. February looks pretty steady. You can see that there's a little bit of bronzing on the thyme, and the this is the Delosperma here, the ice plant. And this is March. And you can see before we got the scuffle hoe out, this was this year, so it probably hasn't been scuffle hoed yet. April, this is when the Baptisia is going to town and the thyme is blooming. This is the Phlox nivalis, which is about done by this must have been the middle to end of April. May, this is the yucca blooming. And you can see back here, these are the flower spikes from the Manfreda. And lavender is starting to bloom. This is lavender as well. Lavender has really enjoyed this garden. June, we've got lavender, the yucca. You can start to see the seed pods on the Baptisia forming. They're attractive in their own right. And this is the agora starting to bloom in June. And there's flowers on the prickly pear. July, still blooming back here. August. So even when there aren't a lot of flowers, the shapes and textures of this garden are really attractive. This, oh, I don't know if you can see this, Crepe Myrtle decided to volunteer here, and Crepe Myrtles bloom super early, but we removed it because these are all Crepe Myrtles back here. September, the fruit is ripening on the prickly pear, which is, by the way, edible, but you've got to be careful because they also have little tiny stickers on them. October, you see the Gaillardia estivalis still blooming. November. And December. And this is before we cut. This is the Gora that we haven't cut back in the Baptisia. We leave these plants that have seeds over winter until usually February. You saw February is pretty cleaned up, and we'll cut them back then and just get ready for the next flush of growth. So that's really the whole program. Now, did anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or just make sure if you want to ask a question, you unmute yourself, or you could put it in the chat box.
So Chris, this doesn't require any fertilizer or anything during the.
No, all we do is when we add a plant, we put some compost in with it. So really not much. We don't do a lot of fertilizing in the garden. We do try to make sure that everything is mulched and composted. So otherwise it's just a lot of recreational pruning.
Wow.
So
Chris, I have a question. How deep did you end up going when you hit that clay and it wouldn't drain? Did you have to go deeper than that, or was the 12 inches good enough?
no, that was at the 12 inches there. And
so even though it didn't drain after that, it was okay?
Yes. What plants do you advise for Saskatchewan, Canada? Fireweed. That's a cute question. I'm sorry, I don't know. Cut back anything during winter or just wait and cut back? I don't think we cut back anything this year until February. That was the question was, do you cut back anything during winter or just wait and cut back everything in January or February? So that's, we leave it for wildlife. The only wildlife I'm sure, well, of course there are a lot of pollinators and well, butterflies and bees anyway, and other insects. We have had, and as far as insect problems, we have had spider mites, because hot dry is their favorite thing. And I got concerned because one year after it bloomed, the first, yes, you can see the first slide. After it bloomed, the Baptisia, one of them was completely eaten down by spider mites, and it didn't look great, but we didn't do anything. So Where'd it go? There we go. Okay, there's the first slide. So, but the next year it came back just fine. So you might have some issues, and we did have a special kind of aphid called a yucca aphid, I think it was, a yucca, maybe just a yucca bug, that we did use some safer soap on it because I was concerned about it. But other than that, we haven't had any issues with that type of thing. And no disease that I'm aware of. It is a wonderful garden. I wish you would all come to see it, because any time of year, and it's a great solution to a problem, because a lot of times there's a corner of your yard where nothing will grow and it's hot and it's dry. And I promise it's going to be hot and dry again. You know it will, because we've had so much rain that it's going to stop sometime. So thank you so much for attending.